Have you ever said, I'm fine, when you were not fine? Have you ever said, maybe I'm wrong, when you knew exactly what you were talking about? Have you ever apologized for asking for something small? Have you ever diminished your accomplishment because saying it out loud just sounded too bold? That is what shrinking can look like. It's not always silence. Sometimes it's being easy. Sometimes it's editing. Sometimes it's smiling. And sometimes it's making yourself smaller so that the room doesn't have to make space for the real you. That is what we're going to talk today about. The quiet ways in which women shrink themselves. Not because they're weak, but because somehow along the way they have learned that being smaller is just safer. I don't think women wake up one day and decide to just disappear. I think it happens over time, little by little. We lower our voices, we diminish our opinion, we say we don't care when we actually truly care. We make our needs less important or secondary to others. We say we're fine when we're not fine. We over-explain our decisions. We make our accomplishments sound like accidents. We laugh something off when it actually hurt us. We pretend not to want what we want because we feel like that is too much, too inconvenient, too selfish. Somehow along the journey, we have confused being easy to work with actually being a good person. That is what I want to talk about today. The many ways in which women shrink themselves. Not because they're weak, not because they're fake, not because they don't know who they are, but because somehow they learn that making themselves smaller feels or actually is safer. This is Real Women Unscripted, a place for real stories, reclaimed voices, and lives unscripted. Today, we're going to talk about the version of you that has learned to take up less space than she was created to occupy. When we talk about women shrinking themselves, I think a lot of people picture something that is obvious. A quiet woman that never speaks up. A person that doesn't have opinion. A person that is completely invisible. However, I believe that more often than not, shrinking can look capable, knowledgeable, successful, accomplished, and even have status. I believe a shrinking woman can still solve problems, address and lead the room, satisfy other people's needs and wants, and yet still not being fully capable of expressing her true needs. Sometimes shrinking is not silence. Sometimes shrinking is editing your own word before they come out of your mouth, editing your own feelings before anyone notices them, editing your dreams before you even acknowledge them for your own self, editing your personality so that no one else becomes uncomfortable. A lot of women are expert at this. They know how to read the room, adjust to make space for others, and how to make people feel okay. We know how to make the truth sound softer, and we know how to ask for something in a way that sounds almost like an apology. We know how to make it sound like, I don't mean to bother you, but I apologize, but maybe I'm wrong, but. And I want to pause for a moment here because I am not talking to you from this high ground like I'm better than you. Absolutely not. I am right there with you. I know what it feels like to have a strong voice and yet hesitate before using it. I know what it means to know exactly what I think and yet wonder if sharing that will cost me something. I know exactly how it feels to be capable and yet wondering, am I too much? And that question is a big question. Am I too much? I think it is a clear clue that a woman has learned how to shrink because she's not being too much. She's just being more honest than the people around her are used to. Most of us did not invent this pattern. Most of us learned it. We absorbed it, sometimes directly, sometimes indirectly, or even quietly. Sometimes through family and relationships, sometimes through work, religion, or culture. Sometimes by watching what made a woman being praised and what made another being punished. We notice things even when we look like we're not paying attention. We notice when agreeable women are called pleasant and when direct women are called difficult. We notice when quiet women are called respectful and opinionated women are called intimidating. Self-sacrificing women are called loving and women with boundaries are called cold. When women who carry everything are called strong and those that honestly say, I can't carry it alone anymore, are treated as if they have changed. So we learn the script. Be kind, but not too honest. Be smart, but not too threatening. Be successful, but not proud. Be confident, but not too confident. Have needs, but not inconvenient ones. Have dreams, but not one that disrupts everyone else's comfort. Be independent, but still available. Be strong, but still likable enough to be accepted by everyone. Those are a lot of rules. And no one handed us a list. By noticing and listening and pay attention, we learned it anyway. We learned where to talk and when to stop, when to smile and when to make ourselves easier, when to absorb the discomfort instead of letting someone else feel in it. And the more we practice this, the more natural it felt. That's exactly what is so tricky about a script. At first, it feels like a performance, but then over time, it becomes a lot more natural. So you start saying things like, I'm not needy, I'm low maintenance. This is who I am. I'm just a private person. I'm easygoing. I don't like conflict. And maybe all of that is actually true, but sometimes what we call personality is actually protection. Sometimes easygoing simply means I've learned that my needs create attention. Sometimes low maintenance really means I just learn not to ask for what I need. I don't like conflict simply means I learn that disagreement can cost me connection. Sometimes I'm fine really means I don't know if my truth is welcome here. That does not mean that everything about you is a wound, but it is worth asking yourself, is this who I truly am? Or did I become this person to be accepted, loved, approved of, or left alone? That question can be uncomfortable, but it can also be freeing. Because once you realize something was learned, you can begin to choose differently. Here's the part that is hard to admit. Shrinking actually works. At least in the beginning, it does. It keeps the peace, it avoids argument, it keeps people comfortable, it protects your image, it helps you avoid being judged, and it keeps everyone liking you. It helps you survive environments when your true self would not have been welcomed. So I do not want to shame shrinking. For some women, shrinking was not weakness. It was actually a strategy. It was emotional intelligence. It was survival. It was the only option that felt available at that time. But what once protected you can eventually become a prison to you. Because the cost of shrinking isn't always immediate. It builds quietly. You lose touch with what you actually want. You become resentful and then feel guilty about being resentful. You say yes, and then you feel trapped by your own yeses. You become exhausted from managing everybody else's reactions. You stop trusting your own voice because you have been editing it for so long. You become more known for your usefulness than your actual truth. That is very painful. That actually hurts because a lot of women are loved for what they provide: the emotional labor, the dependability, the strength, the fixing, the listening, the smoothing things over, the remembering, the anticipating, and the showing up, the making it all work. And those things may be beautiful, but they become dangerous when they are the only version of you that people know and accept. Because the moment you say, I need something, people are shocked. The moment you say, I don't agree, people become offended. The moment you say, I can't, people act as if you just abandoned them. The moment you stop shrinking, people may accuse you of changing. And you might have to say, even if only to yourself, yes, I am changing. I'm not mean. I'm not selfish. I'm not cold. I'm just becoming honest. And honesty can feel like a threat or disruptive to the people who benefit from our silence and getting along. That does not make them villains, but it does mean your growth may create some discomfort. Part of becoming unscripted is realizing that sometimes discomfort does not mean that you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's a sign that the old script is out. There was a time in my life when I left the job because there were some unhealthy dynamics that were going on, and I wasn't really comfortable with them. The point here is not to figure out who's right or wrong. The point is of what I notice within me. I see some unhealthy dynamics according to my own standard. I knew conversation probably needed to take place. However, I didn't feel like the place was safe enough for me to have such open conversations. So instead of shining a light and being honest about what I was seeing and my perception of what I was seeing, I decided to just leave and never utter a word. I'm not even saying that leaving was the wrong decision. Sometimes leaving is wisdom, is security, is safety, is protection. It may even be the healthiest option available at that particular time. Later, I was told that my feedback would have been welcome, that they would have acted on it. Now, Fair enough. I don't know if they would have. I don't know if they could have. I don't know if the situation was so complicated that realistically nothing could be done about it. But when I look back at the situation, I can definitely see what the core question in my mind at the time was. Is honesty and transparency safe for me here? I think a lot of women know what I'm talking about. Maybe not in this exact same scenario, maybe not at work, perhaps in their family, with their friendship, in their relationship, maybe in rooms where you technically have a voice, but you are uncertain whether anybody wants to hear from you. This is one of the many ways and one of the quiet ways in which we shrink. Shrinking is not always not being truthful or 100% honest. It's not always keep quiet but stay in the environment. Sometimes it's completely walking away before we say what needed to be said. Sometimes we decide it's best for me to leave because this room may punish me for speaking up. Whether that is actually what will happen or not, somewhere along the way we picked up that script. And so our mind is telling us that that is exactly what will happen. So we don't even go there. So sometimes the decision is survival. And your body, viscerally inside of you, is telling you before your mind can even catch up to it. And sometimes the room that you're in is truly not ready for the full truth. But part of becoming unscripted, in my opinion, is being able to ask yourself, is it my discernment speaking? Or isn't the old truth holding me back? Because discernment is different than disappearance. Wisdom says, this room is not safe for my truth. Shrinking says, my truth is too much for this room. And those are not the same thing. That is why this topic matters to me, because I understand what it means to become very capable and yet still carrying the question, how much of me is safe to share here? That question can follow you in rooms where on paper you absolutely belong. Boardrooms, leadership rooms, family room, friendship rooms, even rooms you helped build. You can have authority and still shrink emotionally. You can have plenty of experience and still soften your truth. You can still have accomplishments and yet minimize them every time. You can be strong and still wonder if your full voice will be too strong for the environment. I think a lot of women live in the contradiction. They tell you to be confident, but not too arrogant. To lead, but don't be threatening. To speak up, but make sure nobody gets defensive. To have standards and hold people accountable, but don't be demanding. Be authentic, but only in ways that are completely acceptable. And when you're constantly calculating and guessing and trying to figure it out, how much of your true self the particular room you're in at that moment can handle, it becomes exhausting. That is not freedom. That is nothing but performance. Perhaps the performance is subtle. Nobody really notices. You're still very composed, very successful, very kind, and you look like you have it all together. But inside, there's a level of grief because you're only allowed to show the part of yourself that you know has been pre-approved. Not the full version, not the honest version, not the version with sharper edges, deeper desires, stronger opinions, clearer boundaries, and biggest dreams. Just the acceptable version of you. And let me be very clear here. I'm not saying that we should walk through life and completely let go of all filters. That is a recipe for quick disaster. That is not maturity at all. That is not being unscripted. That is complete chaos. There is wisdom in timing, discernment, and knowing what belongs in which room. And again, discernment is different than disappearance. Wisdom asks, is this the right time and place for this? Shrinking asks, will they still like me after I'm honest with them? Those are not the same question. I think a lot of women have spent many, many years calling something wisdom when in all reality it was nothing but fear. Not because we're weak, but because we have learned. We have learned how to soften ourselves, read the room, predict reactions. We have learned to make ourselves easier, leave the room before we're dismissed, become quiet before we're punished. We learned to disappear before somebody tells us that we're too much. Sometimes that instinct protects us, but sometimes it's making a decision before we even had a chance to vote on it. Sometimes we're not reacting to what is currently happening. We are reacting to all rooms we were in that weren't ready for our truth. That is why noticing matters so much. Because we can reclaim a voice that we are saying we never lost. We cannot become unscripted if we keep calling fear wisdom. So maybe the question is not, should I say everything always? No, that is definitely not the question. The question is, am I choosing silence from wisdom or am I choosing it from fear? Am I living because this room is truly not safe for me? Or am I living because I've decided that my truth is not welcome here? That is a hard question and is also freeing because once we can tell the difference, we can start choosing differently. Not recklessly, not loudly, just to prove a point, not without wisdom, but honestly. And that perhaps is the first step toward taking your space back. Here is the refrain I want to offer. Taking up space does not mean taking over. It does not mean become loud just to prove that you actually exist. It does not mean dominating every conversation. It does not mean being harsh, losing your kindness, or abandoning your softness. It simply means allowing your true self to be present. That's it. Your real thought, your real needs, your real preference, your real no, your real yes, your real grief, your real joy, your real ambitions, your uncertainty, your strength, and your tenderness. Taking up space can be very quiet. It can sound like, I actually see it differently. That does not work for me. I need some time to think before I answer that. I am proud of what I did. I want something different now. I am not available for that. I actually care about this more than I have admitted before. I don't really want to keep saying that I'm fine when I'm really not. None of those statements are cruel in any way. None of them are dramatic or unreasonable. They're simply honest. And for a woman who spent years just being quiet and shrinking, it can feel like a rebellion, My baby is not rebellion, it's just returning. Returning to the real version of you that had always been there, asking to be let out for the world to see. Return to the version of you that you learned to edit. Return to the strength of your full voice that you learned to keep quiet. Return to all the dreams that you have learned to downplay. Return to the truth that you have learned how to wrap around so many apologies. I think that's exactly the heart of becoming unscripted. Not becoming someone completely new, but slowly recovering the parts of yourself that you learned to hide so well. So, what do we do with this? Because honestly, I don't think that women can watch one episode of Real Women Unscripted and suddenly stop shrinking in all aspects of their lives. That is not realistic, and honestly, I don't even think it's quite wise. Some wombs are not ready for your full truth. Some people may not have earned full access to the deepest parts of you. Some environments require strategy. So it's not about blurring everything out and calling it healing. It's about noticing. Start there. Noticing where you shrink. Noticing around who do you shrink. And notice, what are you apologizing for? Noticing when you say, I am fine, too quickly. Notice when you minimize something that actually matters to you. Notice when you pretend not to care. Notice when your body knows the truth before your mouth even admits it. And then ask yourself an honest question. What would one honest size bigger look like? Not 10 size bigger. Not a complete new personality transplant. Just one honest size bigger. If you normally say whatever you want, perhaps one honest size bigger is saying, I actually do have a preference. If you tend to say, that was nothing, perhaps one honest size bigger is saying, thank you, I work hard on that. If you tend to say yes quickly, perhaps one honest size bigger is saying, let me check, I'll get back with you. If you normally hide your disappointment, perhaps one size bigger is saying, that really hurt. If you normally downplay your dreams, perhaps one honest size bigger is saying them out loud to someone safe. That is how we begin. Not by forcing ourselves into this fearless woman overnight, but by practicing truth in small, grounded ways. Because the goal is not to become the loudest person in the room. The actual goal is to stop abandoning yourself to be acceptable to others. That is the work. Quiet, brave, messy, holy even, definitely very unscripted. I want to leave you with a few questions today. Don't worry, no homework here. Only if you're up to it. It's really an invitation. Where have I learned to take up less space? What part of me do I edit most often? Who gets the smallest version of me? Who gets the most honest version of me? What am I afraid will happen if I stopped shrinking? Perhaps the last one is the hardest one. What has shrinking helped me avoid? That question really matters. Perhaps it helped you avoid conflict. Maybe it helped you avoid rejection. Maybe it helped you avoid being judged. Maybe it helped you avoid disappointing people. Or maybe it helped you avoid being seen. Being seen sounds wonderful, doesn't it? Well, it does. Until you realize the being seen also means being misunderstood sometimes, disliked sometimes, questioned sometimes, not liked sometimes. That is exactly why shrinking can feel safer. But safer and free are not the same thing. I think for many women, there comes a point when the environment that keep you safe start feeling like a true cage. A beautiful cage, maybe. A responsible cage. A socially acceptable cage. A cage decorated all over with compliments like, "You are so easy. You are so strong. You never need anything. You are always fine." And yet, it's still a cage. At some point, some part of you will start screaming from the inside and say, "I want out. I want to breathe. I want to tell the truth. I want to stop performing and being the real me. I want to stop being grateful for crumbs when I'm hungry for real life. I want to stop making myself small so that the people around me don't have to grow." And those were supposed to be whispered, but I just get carried away. I guess my inner unscripted wanted to come out loud today. But seriously, whether it's a whisper or a loud voice inside of you, listen to it. It matters. Those voices, those whispers, may be the beginning of your unscripted life. So today, I want you to hear this. You do not have to shrink to be loved. You do not have to disappear to be kind. You do not need to over-explain to be understood. That is one that I do a lot, by the way. You do not have to minimize your gift to make other people feel comfortable. You do not have to apologize for having a voice. And no, this does not mean that everyone gets to experience the full version of you. Some people benefited from the smaller version of you. Some people may not know what to do once you stop playing the role that they are used to. But becoming unscripted means that you're no longer willing to trade self-abandonment for approval. Not perfectly, not all at once, but honestly. One moment at a time, one truth at a time, one less apology at a time, one honest size bigger. And as always, I want to leave you with the question that we always come back to in this channel, which is, what would the unscripted version of you say? If this conversation spoke to some part of you, I hope you stay in touch through this channel. Real Women Unscripted is not about having it all figured out. It's about being open and honest on the journey to becoming unscripted. So if you haven't already, subscribe and stay a while. And if you want a quick smile before you go, stay for the unscripted moments coming up next. The little behind the scene pieces that remind us that becoming unscripted is not always polished. Okay, one more. Those are a lot. Okay, one more. And those are. Thank you for being here and see you next episode.